The brutal reality of marching in a Roman legion. Picture an army so vast that if you stood at the rear of the column, you might never see where it began. But this was no ordinary army. It was an entire city in motion. A city where camp kitchens smoked at dawn. Tents were pulled down in perfect order. Engineers hauled their tools. Surgeons treated the injured. And merchants even tagged along selling wine and bread. All while the march pressed forward. This video takes you inside that moving machine, the Roman legion on campaign. Step by step, hour by hour, you'll witness how Rome turned the chaos of travel into a weapon of war. And by the end, you might be asking yourself, would I even last a single day alongside the soldiers of Rome? But before we dive into the daily march, we need to face the staggering numbers. During the height of the Roman Empire, a standard campaign army often included 2 full legions. That meant 13,000 to 14,000 highly trained Roman legionaries. Yet, they were never alone. Alongside them marched another 5,000 to 6,000 auxiliary troops, Numidian cavalrymen, Syrian archers, Germanic infantry, Balearic slingers, and countless others. These weren't Roman citizens, but fighters who served for pay and the chance to earn citizenship. Already, that's nearly 20,000 combat-ready men. And behind the battlefield muscle was the hidden workforce. 3,000 to 4,000 cooks, slaves, servants, smiths, and laborists. They cared for the pack animals, repaired weapons, built tents, prepared meals, and hauled gear. Some were assigned to the army itself, others were privately owned by senior officers. Now add the animals, 4,500 to 5,000 mules, plus horses for officers, cavalrymen, and messengers. Each animal could haul up to 130 kilograms of supplies, stakes, rations, siege engines, even the disassembled parts of catapults. When all was counted, the force in motion wasn't just an army. It was a caravan of 25,000 to 30,000. Living beings, soldiers, servants, civilians, horses, mules, oxen, carts, and weapons. Polybius, the ancient historian, once called a legion on the march a moving wall of flesh. He wasn't exaggerating. A Roman army on the move could stretch for 8 to 12 kilometers along a road. By the time the front of the column was crossing a river, the rear was still breaking down camp. The scale was mind-bending. But the real challenge was this. How do you keep such a monster moving day after day without it collapsing under its own weight? That's where Roman discipline comes into play. The morning routine. The march began in darkness, between 3 and 4 in the morning, during the 4th watch of the night. The first sound was not shouting officers or clashing weapons, but the muffled hooves of horsemen. These were the speculators, the legion scouts and spies. More than simple riders, they were an elite corps. Their mission, ride out ahead before dawn, check routes, sniff out ambushes, and keep the main column safe. Back at camp, centurions woke their men with a blast of the cornu, the great curved war horn. Nothing was left to chance. Each contubernium, a team of 8 legionaries, dismantled its tent, packed tools, sharpened weapons, tightened armor straps, and checked sandals for wear. Most important of all, every man carried his entire world on his back. Unlike other armies, Roman soldiers didn't rely on wagons for personal equipment. Each legionary carried 20 to 30 kilos, his gladius sword, scutum shield, javelins, digging tools, cooking pots, wooden stakes for fortifications, rations for 3 days, and personal gear. They weren't just fighters. They were builders, engineers, and beasts of burden. This was why the men earned the nickname Muli Mariani, Marius, mules, after the consul who had reformed the army generations earlier. At the same time, the high command reviewed intelligence. The legatus legionis, commander, his tribunes, and chief engineers gathered to hear reports from scouts and messengers. They chose the day's route carefully, avoiding marshes, steep terrain, or areas prone to ambush. Every decision was calculated, predictable, but never vulnerable. Animals were prepared, mules fed, carts inspected, and the supply train assembled in perfect order. A single error could delay the entire column. By sunrise, the vanguard was already on the move, and the silence of the march began. The vanguard. At the very front marched the vanguard, the most dangerous position. This wasn't just a handful of scouts. Rome carefully selected the best auxiliary troops for this role. Fast-moving cavalry from Numidia and Thrace, expert archers from Crete and Syria, fierce Gauls skilled at tracking, and light infantry ready to sprint, strike, or retreat. Their job was to clear the path ahead. Ambushes, traps, hostile villages, enemy scouts, all had to be dealt with before the main body arrived. The vanguard was Rome's alarm system. Sometimes they marched 3 kilometers ahead, especially in dense forests like Germania. This distance gave them space to detect threats, call for reinforcements, or fall back without throwing the column into chaos. But if the vanguard failed, the entire legion could be wiped out before the main body even knew what was happening. That's why only hardened veterans served. Here, men trusted to act without hesitation. Surveyors, command, and the main body. Right behind them came the agrimensors, military surveyors, armed with tools like the grommer. They chose and mapped the site of that knight's camp before the legion even arrived. Water supply, high ground, access to wood, fields for battle, all were measured in hours before tents went up. Their accuracy could decide the success or failure of the campaign. The command group followed, the legatus, tribunes, engineers, and staff officers surrounded by guards. Horse messengers galloped between front, flanks, and rear, carrying coded orders. Rome's heartbeat flowed from here. Then came the corps, the legions themselves. 13,000 Roman soldiers, organized into cohorts and centuries, marched in perfect order. Veterans in front set the pace. Raw recruits in the middle, where they could learn without breaking formation. Known troublemakers at the rear, where centurions kept close watch. It wasn't a battle formation but a snake-like column 2 or 3 men wide, designed to win through valleys and mountain trails without breaking cohesion. The baggage train. Following the soldiers was the lifeline of the legion, the baggage train, or impedimenta. This wasn't a ragtag collection of carts, it was the logistical heart of the army. Here traveled grain, salt, vinegar, spare weapons, building tools, maps, disassembled artillery, and medical supplies. It was painfully slow, so it always marched shielded, either in the middle of the column or directly behind the main body. Guards and light cavalry protected it constantly. A single broken cart or missing mule could threaten the whole campaign. Discipline here was brutal. Servants who disobeyed orders were beaten, sometimes even executed. Rear and flank guards. Behind the train marched the rear guard, seasoned troops who protected stragglers, kept morale steady, and crushed any hint of desertion. To march at the rear wasn't punishment, it was a deadly responsibility. A rear attack could unravel the column in panic, as it had at the disastrous Battle of Teutoburg Forest, when 3 legions were destroyed in 9 AD. After that, Rome made the rearguard stronger, more proactive, and relentless in discipline. Meanwhile, flank guards marched unseen along the sides. Light cavalry, skirmishers, and scouts slipped through forests and hills, watching villages and ambush points. They often walked farther, slept less, and fought more than the rest of the legion. Their task was simple but vital: protect the sides of the column, or the entire army could be destroyed. Building the night camp. But marching was only half the battle. At the end of each day, the legion built a fortress from scratch, guided by the surveyors. They dug ditches, raised earthen walls, and planted wooden stakes carried on their backs. 4 gates were laid out, guards posted instantly. Inside, tents went up in strict order, officers in the center, soldiers on the flanks, auxiliaries on the edges, baggage animals in separate zones. At the center rose the praetorium, the commander's tent and altar. Internal streets were measured out with mathematical precision. Kitchens, storehouses, and even latrines had designated places. And all of this, an entire fortified city, was completed in under 4 hours. That routine was one of Rome's greatest weapons, no matter where they camped. They were always behind walls. The Roman night. Night didn't mean rest, it meant vigilance. Soldiers ate their rations quietly, grinding wheat into porridge, mixing vinegar and water into posca, tending animals, and repairing gear. Fires were kept low to avoid detection. Centurions read out orders for the next day, punishments and executions, if needed, were carried out calmly. Reminders that discipline never slept. Silence was absolute. Loud voices, music, even laughter were forbidden. Each sentry carried the password, the tessera, and rotated shifts every 3 hours. Falling asleep on watch was punished by death at the hands of one's own comrades. Every soldier slept armed. Shield at his side, sandals within reach, ready to form ranks at a moment's notice. The machine of Rome. And so the cycle repeated: march, guard, fortify, watch. Day after day, week after week. What looked like a simple march was in fact a flawless machine of survival, strategy, and discipline. The Legion wasn't just an army. It was a city that carried its own walls, its own laws, its own world.